All right, welcome back to Last Two In. We're coming off a big week in college football. I'm Charlie Hunter. I'm here with Will Hurdle, and we're going to dive right in. First game of the week, first game of the Big Ten's return. Number 14, Wisconsin, 45-7 win over Illinois. Graham Mertz, first-year starter at quarterback, 20 for 21, 248 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Then, a couple days later, proceeds to get coronavirus along with his backup. So what are your thoughts on Wisconsin, Graham Mertz's performances? Where do they go from here, especially considering they're going to probably have a third string starting for at least the next 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, Wisconsin's kind of in an interesting spot. I think that Illinois is a better team than a lot of people think. I don't think they're necessarily a pushover team in the West. I think, though, like we said last week, the West has a lot of those teams that are just kind of like about 500 teams. They're not good. They're not bad. Illinois under Lovie Smith has been pretty good, though. So I think that was an impressive performance by Wisconsin. And I think whenever Wisconsin has a quarterback like this, they're really dangerous. Normally they have a good offensive line and a good running game. So we haven't necessarily seen like a Wisconsin team completely focused on quarterback and offensive air raid, that kind of thing. So I think that it's pretty exciting if you're a Wisconsin fan. But I mean, I don't know how you just go ahead and get coronavirus right after that. Big celebrations, I guess, must have been with his backups because I don't know. I mean, I'm about to go apply to Wisconsin and see if I can start next week.
Yeah, I mean it was a big night for the QB room at Wisconsin, I guess. But I mean, my question with Wisconsin this year has always been on the offensive side, how do you account for the loss of Jonathan Taylor
Hmm.
in the NFL now, second round pick to the Colts? Obviously put up huge numbers through his years at Wisconsin. And this is the first time in a while that Wisconsin has seemed to have at least a dynamic quarterback that they can run their offense through. Looking back for really the large part of the past decade, it's been the running backs, Melvin Gordon, Taylor, like I mentioned. You can take it back all the way to Monty Ball if you want to. But yeah, so I know there's lots of hope when Jack Cohn earlier in his career, he didn't turn out to be the dynamic guy they hoped he would be. But after one game, Graham Mertz seems to be that for Wisconsin. So it looks like they have a chance to contend, but now you have him out for 21 days at least per Big Ten protocol. So it's, can you stay afloat for 3 weeks without him at quarterback? Like I said, probably with a third stringer, considering his backup is also sick. Um, I think if you can stay afloat, they have a chance to contend. It's just a matter of not, falling victim to, the third string quarterback over these next 3 weeks for Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think if there's any conference that you could stay in it when you have a chance to lose like 3 straight games, like Wisconsin might do, is the Big Ten West. Because I don't see any team necessarily going undefeated in the Big Ten West. No, Wisconsin looked the best out of all the teams from that first week, and now their quarterbacks have coronavirus. And other than that, it looks just like the Big Ten West is going to kind of be a battle to see who can get to the top of that. So even if they drop 2 of the next 3 or one of the next 3 or whatever they do, I still think Wisconsin has a good chance to be at the top of that, especially given Minnesota's performance.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned it earlier, Illinois isn't a bad team.
Yeah.
Um, a 45-7 blowout like that, that's not, just your quarterback carrying you. That's a good defensive performance that requires a lot from your supporting cast on offense. So, you're hopeful that you got a good performance out of Illinois, and it just happens to be that your team is that good.
Hmm.
That, when we're just talking about the box score, that you make Illinois look that bad.
Yeah.
So that game wasn't close. If we want to talk a game that was close for a half, let's move to Ohio State and Wisconsin. Justin Fields was almost perfect in that game. Nebraska hung with them for about the first half, but then we saw Ohio State pull away like we saw so many times last year. So Justin Fields, did he look better or worse than what you expected coming into this season? Do you think Ohio State is still, clear cut favorites to win the Big Ten? Or do you think someone like Wisconsin now can touch them?
I don't think right now that anyone, especially in the Big Ten East, can touch Ohio State. I mean, the second half of that game was very dominant, and the first half was almost everything was going right for Nebraska, and yet they still could only hang in the game. So I still think Ohio State's clear-cut favorites there. Based on the way Wisconsin played, we're gonna have to wait to see how the Big Ten West plays out, and if Illinois is really good like they were last year, or if they're just on a down year or whatever. But I thought that game was really impressive for Ohio State, just to not get too bothered by the score in the first half and come back and just blow them out of the water in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of the formula Ohio State used last year, especially late in the season as their competition kind of ramped up. We got basically flawless performance out of Justin Fields. Last year he only had two interceptions the entire season.
Yeah, something like
So
that.
that's just kind of the formula they use. They have a strong running game. They bring in Master Teague, the third in the backfield this year. A bit high hopes for him coming into the year. Then you have
Oh yeah.
Justin Fields again being super efficient on that side of the ball. Defense, I mentioned this last week. Defense is still going to be really good. So I agree with you. They're still going to be the favorite. I think Wisconsin's hope right now is that if Grant Mertz keeps playing like he did play last week, once he does return, I think he might be the second best quarterback in the conference. So I think, just by virtue of that, you can compete with Ohio State maybe. But, especially considering that he's going to be out and that Ohio State is probably a better team in every other aspect.
Yeah.
I'm still rolling with the Buckeyes here.
Yeah, same. I mean, if you're Nebraska, though, go party like it's like 1970 or whenever you guys were last good, because you hung with a good team for a half. This is about the best thing we've seen from their program in years.
The Scott Frost era is really taking off now.
We'll take only down one at half.
Yep. Big win for them.
Yeah.
If we want to talk about another big win, up to Jersey, we'll talk about Rutgers' first Big Ten win in probably recent memory. Against Michigan State. State 7 turnovers in that game, but is this a sign of hope for Rutgers, or is this just kind of a fluke from Michigan State to kind of let a really bad program historically in Rutgers get the best of them this week?
Yeah, I don't think Michigan State's going to be good this year, but I do think that they're better than Rutgers. I think 7 turnovers. I doubt that there's ever been a team to have 7 turnovers and still win a game, or if there's, because how many turnovers did Rutgers had? They only had like 1 or 2, right? Yeah. So, I mean, with a turnover differential like that, it's almost impossible to win a game like that. So if I'm a Michigan State fan, I'm not saying they're going to be good, especially with how hard the Big Ten East can be this year. But I don't think they're going to be at the bottom of the Big Ten like a lot of people are trying to put them right now. I think that's a few mistakes that end up costing them the game. And yeah, they look bad, but if you look at the box score, they performed a lot better than the final score indicated. They did better in passing, rushing, receiving yards, all of that. So if you're Michigan State, I don't think lose your mind. If you're Rutgers, I think you can lose your mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to admit, like, we talk a lot on here about football that we're not interested in. Usually we're talking about the Big 12 or the Pac 12. I think Rutgers football falls into that category. I didn't want to watch this game. I don't want to revisit the film from this game, but happy for them. I'm sure they're having a great time in Jersey this weekend. Got some friends there. I hope they're doing well. I hope they had fun this weekend. But yeah, I don't think if you're a Rutgers fan, I don't think this is the start of your road to Big Ten dominance. I think it's just kind of a happy moment. Maybe it's the definition of 2020. 2020 Rutgers finally gets a Big Ten win. But yeah. So if we're gonna call that an upset, maybe an even bigger upset, Penn State losing to Indiana 36-35 in overtime. Obviously, a super controversial play there at the end with Michael Penix diving for the pylon there. So first, I want to know: do you think he was in? Second, what does this mean for Penn State and Indiana, for that matter?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear that he wasn't in, but not clear enough that they could overturn the call on the field. Like, if you look at it, like, it's easy to look at it now, but there's no, I guess, definitive evidence to show that it wasn't in. And so it was going to go with what they called on the field no matter what. So I don't think that's necessarily an officiating error as much as it is kind of unlucky for Penn State, I guess, because I think that technically they probably should have won that game if you're just going based on that. But if you're Penn State, I think you should freak out a little bit, but not exactly not too much. I don't think Penn State's going to necessarily be competing with Ohio State like their fans thought they were. I think they're going to be a solid team, probably around the 20th spot in top 25, maybe a little bit better than that. But IU is a good team this year. Like we said, we talked about this last week. You know, they've got the pieces to be a really good team. They just have a really hard schedule this year. And this was one of those games where, you know, we were talking about, we see them only picking up about 4 wins because we don't think that they could compete with the top teams, and they showed us that they could based on this week. So it's really interesting to see how they're going to match up against even better teams. I don't think you can necessarily claim to be a top 25. I think there is a little bit of overreaction. You know, they immediately threw IU into the top 25 and dropped Penn State a lot. I think you got to see how they perform in the coming weeks, especially against like average teams or below average teams, because if you want to be a really good team, you can't just compete with the good teams. You also need to blow the other teams out of the water. So I think we've got a lot more to learn about IU than we thought we did going into this season.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that jump into the top 25. It wasn't a small jump. It wasn't like, 25, 24, 23, that type of range. They went all the way up to 17 in the
Yeah.
AP poll. And, they, on a game that they probably shouldn't have won, because I agree, he wasn't in. Um, I think that was one of those things where if you're anything except for an IU fan, you're just hoping that like, man, can like the refs just make a common sense call? Like
Yeah.
take the rules out of it, just make the common sense call here. But on Penn State's side of it, I think they came into this game number 8 in the country. And I think
Yeah.
that was a little high for them, given that they're probably missing their best player on both sides of the ball, with Journey Brown out and Micah Parsons opting out to prepare for the draft. So I think I was really interested to see what Penn State would look like this year. And obviously they didn't play bad. I know I talked a lot of bad stuff about Indiana last week. They're not a bad team. They're probably going to exceed those 4 wins we gave to them now
Mm-hmm.
after this upset. But yeah, so I think Penn State probably has to clean up a lot. They have to find a way to play without those guys that I mentioned. I think, there's probably hope for Indiana now, though. I don't think this was like entirely something that we can throw out on Indiana's side just because they shouldn't have won the game on a ref decision. Michael Penix played well. They still have Walt Filer. They have enough pieces that to hold up to like a good team like Penn State, because maybe Penn State lost this, they're missing some guys, but they're still a good team. You can't just throw that out the window. So maybe if you're an Indiana fan, celebrate a little harder, or not a little harder, a little less this week. Be ready for maybe a vibe check coming your way in the future. But I think there's hope there in Bloomington. Penn State, I also think there's hope. You just got to clean it up a bit.
Yeah, I still refuse to acknowledge that IU can be a top 25 team with a quarterback named Penix. So
Yeah,
that's just a personal choice. But
yeah. All my homies hate Michael Penix. All right, we'll keep it in Indiana here. We'll move up north a little bit. Purdue, I was a big Purdue money line guy this week betting. People told me I was throwing my money away. I did not throw my money away. Purdue beat Iowa without their head coach and probably their best player in Rondale Moore this week. Thoughts on that? Can Purdue, what did we learn about Purdue this week, and what did we learn about Iowa for that matter?
I think that it was a pretty impressive performance. You know, like you said, they're missing their quarterback, missing Rondell Moore is the most dynamic player on the field. And then they're also missing one of their starting running backs. So they had to go with Xander Horvath, who normally wouldn't get that many touches. He'll still be in the rotation, but he was definitely getting a lot more touches than you can look for him to get later on in the season. Uh, I think that the way they were able to stay together in that game, David Bell played his mind off, like he played out of his mind. I think every time that Rondell Moore has been gone last year and this year, David Bell has shown that he's just as dangerous in different ways as Rondell Moore is. And Iowa just had absolutely no match for him. If you're Iowa, I think there's a little bit of concern that you couldn't beat this Purdue team. I think they definitely had a little bit more hope in the season than what they saw out on the field on Saturday. I think Iowa's just going to be another one of those teams that's going to be fighting to go about 500 in the West. I think Purdue, once they get all their pieces back together, I think they can put a run to be towards that top 3 of the West, but it's going to be a real battle in there. So I think that the Boilermakers have a solid chance. They've got Wisconsin in 2 weeks when they probably still won't have their quarterbacks. So look for that to be a possible upset or whatever you'd call it when you're playing a third string quarterback. But yeah, I thought it was a good performance by Purdue, but there's definitely some stuff they can clean up.
Yeah, I mean, it was a close game. Like it wasn't like Purdue just came in here and destroyed Iowa. Like it was a
Hmm.
close game. We mentioned last week the kind of quarterback questions that Purdue had. Not necessarily because there was an issue, but just because there's, a large quantity of them. You have too many, you got to start one. But
Yeah,
Aiden O'Connell got the start this week, pulled out the win without your head coach, without your number one receiver. I think that's almost all you can ask for
yeah,
out of him. So I think there's lots of hope for Purdue. They're only going to get better from here on out. Especially you mentioned that Wisconsin game. They're probably going to run into them at the best time they can without their top two quarterbacks. Um, so I think I forget exactly how many wins we were talking about for Purdue last week, but given they already got one under their belt, they're going to have a chance to upset Wisconsin going forward. I think they can probably exceed whatever expectation we had for them. And I picked them to win the West last week. They were kind of a trendy pick for me. I'm still
yep.
keeping that. I liked that pick.
Let's
So
go.
I was impressed with them this week, and I'm hoping that continues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely hoping this continues, but you know, I've learned to not get too hopeful for Purdue sports because I just continually get let down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in. I'm all in on this team. I'll do it
I
for
just
you.
can't be. I can't
I'm
have my
going
heart
all in
broken
for you.
again.
All right. Well, let's talk about some other people who've probably had their hearts broken for about a decade now. That's Michigan. This week there actually was some hope up in Ann Arbor. They had a really dominant performance against number 21 Minnesota, 49-24 win. It's not like Minnesota played badly. So this was Joe Milton's first start at quarterback. Another year of the Jim Harbaugh era starting. So can Michigan be a contender? What are your thoughts on them right now?
I think that was probably one of the better wins for Jim Harbaugh in his career at Michigan. I think, like you said, Minnesota didn't play badly. Michigan was just really dominant, especially on offense in that game. So I think Michigan, they definitely are looking like a contender in the Big Ten East. Uh, I don't know if you're Minnesota. I don't think you worry too much. I still think you row the boat. They're going to be in that conversation for the top teams in the Big Ten West. Like we said, Wisconsin's going to be missing quarterbacks, so they'll probably pick up a loss or two. This isn't going to hurt Minnesota that much. But I mean, Michigan played really well. I still don't think they're as good as Ohio State, not even necessarily that close. They've got Michigan State this weekend. That game could get relatively ugly if Michigan State's turnover issues continue. And I think Michigan's going to have another chance to really flex their muscles against the Michigan State team. So I think we'll have to wait in coming weeks when they get, this was a solid test, but we still don't know how good Minnesota is. They lost a lot to the draft last year. So right now I'd say Michigan's a contender, but I still don't think they can get over that hump and beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I think given just if you wanted a 1 week showing, if you're a Michigan fan, you wanted a 1 week showing to give your to give you some hope going forward for the rest of the season. I think this is like exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
Because like I said, it wasn't like it was a horrible performance from Minnesota. They didn't hand the game to Michigan by any means. Tanner Morgan, one touchdown, one pick, not bad by any means. Mohamed Ibrahim on the ground, 140 yards, two touchdowns. Rashad Bateman, who just opted back in, 9 catches for 101 yards. So those are kind of the guys that you expected to, get a lot of volume in this Minnesota offense, and they did that, and they played well. They did what they needed to do with their touches, and Michigan still, ran away with that game. So, I think we do need to see more from Michigan. Um, if we're going to put them in that contender category, especially if we're going to put them anywhere near Ohio State, I don't think anyone in a right mindset is going to do that right now.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think if I'm in Ann Arbor, or especially if I'm Jim Harbaugh and I'm trying to keep my job, um, I'm really happy with the way my team played last weekend. And, I think, like you said, probably another game this week that's going to look really good in the box score against Michigan State. So yeah, lots to be hopeful for going forward for Michigan.
Yeah, and like as we talk about this stuff, like are people contenders? It, like we can't tell because I don't even think teams like know what they're gonna do because I don't know if that makes sense. But as we've seen from the SEC, some teams have come out just completely flat when we thought they'd be better, like LSU. Some teams are playing way better than we thought they would. It's kind of all over the place. Teams are slipping up on defense. Games are scoring higher than they normally do. So any of these takes could be wrong. They just probably won't be because we're
Yeah.
incredibly intelligent.
Disclaimer: you can't blame us, but like you should trust us.
Yeah. Like if you're
But
gonna
yeah,
trust anyone, trust us.
yeah, but like you said, I mean, I think we're still waiting, especially in the Big Ten, to see what the effects of this really weird off season are on the way that this football season plays out. Um, so I think it's gonna be really interesting to see. I think if we're wrong, blame it on 2020, blame it on
Yeah.
uh, everything going on. Don't blame it on us. We're just doing our
Yeah.
best here. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're gonna switch conferences for a bit. A team we talked about, being a little up and down, like Michigan has been for the past few years. Um, North Carolina, they got back on track. Big win against NC State this week. Do you think that North Carolina has kind of reestablished itself in any way? There's so much hope for them coming into the season. Um, where did they go after this win? Do you think that they can maybe, where do they stand as competition? The ACC, I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
I guess if you're looking at it right now, I mean, the ACC has had, Miami, who tried against Clemson, didn't go very well. They've been struggling a little bit as of late. They barely beat Virginia, I think, this week, if
Hmm.
I'm correct. So they're not necessarily on top of their game. Notre Dame had that, I guess we'll call it a fluke last week where they put up 12 points against Louisville. They came back and put up a good number of points this week. So if you're looking at it, I think North Carolina is definitely in that top three in the ACC. Unfortunately, that conference is so weak at many parts that if they want to get in, have any talk nationally, they're going to have to upset Clemson probably, which frankly I don't see happening. But I'm glad for them. Sam Howell played well. He's a good quarterback. NC State's not a bad team. Always good to beat your rivals. So I think they're back on track. I think they'll be solid. Probably, around 15th in the country if I had to guess. But yeah, I'm glad that they're back.
Yeah, I mean, the question with North Carolina, I think, has been if they can kind of have a solid performance on both sides of the ball, because that defense has kind of given up a lot of points these past few weeks. They held NC State to 21. 7 of those came kind of in garbage time. So I think that's the defensive performance you're looking for if you're UNC. And NC State's probably the best team they've played so far. So if I'm UNC, I'm happy with the way my team performed this week. On offense, you got 160 yards, 3 touchdowns out of Javonte Williams. He's the guy you need to perform to complement Sam Howell at quarterback. So I think that they can provide some competition. I'd like to see this be done more on a consistent basis because, like I said, they've been up and down. Defense has not been great all year, but if this is going to be who they are going forward, then I think that they can really be a contender in the ACC.
Yeah, I agree. Moving out of the Power Five, Charlie's hot take having Cincinnati. Would you have them at 5, 4?
Yep, 5.
Yep, 5. They helped you out a lot. They made you look pretty smart. They blew SMU out of the water. What did you think about that game?
I mean, first of all, I'm a big Group of Six guy or Power Six guy, so I was super happy with the way they performed. They really came through for me. Didn't want that quote going viral. My 5-minute praise for Cincinnati, but 42-13 against a really good SMU team. They were undefeated coming into this game. Um, you got to be happy with that if you're Cincinnati. Desmond Ritter showed he was really a dual threat at quarterback. 100 over 100 yards, 1 touchdown passing, 8 carries, 179 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. And then that defense really came through. They gave up 10 points in the second quarter to SMU, 3 points in the fourth quarter in garbage time, no points anywhere else. So it's a Cincinnati team that's all around really good. Their schedule, I mentioned it last week, they have a chance to go undefeated. They should be favored in every game going forward. And if this is going to be how they show up against really good teams in these big games on their schedule, then I don't see that changing. So I was really impressed with him this week. I'm going to keep them in my top 5, but yeah, I think they proved me right. I got a question this week from someone asked me if I really think Cincinnati can beat Georgia. Last week, I don't know if I was going to buy that. I think I was going more off a resume thing. This week, I think I might be buying that.
Let's go.
Yep. Go
Hop on the
Bearcats.
bandwagon, everyone. Go Bearcats. Big fans.
But yeah, so I think that's the team I'm really excited to see going forward. Desmond Ridder, really good quarterback. He's going to be making dynamic plays all year. So, I think they're going to be able to put up points on anyone. But if we're going to take it to a conference in that Power 6, maybe one that I might even put below the ACC because we don't like it. Big 12.
All my homies hate the Big 12.
Yep. We were giving lots of love to Oklahoma State. Both of us were last week. They came through, big win against Iowa State. My bad, top 25 team this week, with a really good quarterback in Brock Purdy. So what do we see from Oklahoma State this week? Are we keeping them in our top 5? Do we think that they have a shot at the playoff?
Yeah, I'm for sure keeping them top 5. I mean, Iowa State's a good team, like you mentioned. They've got some good wins over some solid teams this year, so they've established themselves as a contender in the Big 12. And Oklahoma State was able to come out of there with a win, so I don't think this does anything to hurt their resume. Definitely boosts them a little bit in national rankings. I think if they win out, I think they'll likely get a spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, with Jalen Waddle out for Alabama now, I think they probably have unquestionably one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in the nation. That's Spencer Sanders and Tylan Wallace. So, as long as you have a duo like that, you're going to be in contention every game you play. And especially when your conference doesn't have that many top tier teams in it, and you're playing a conference only schedule, I think it really, it bodes well for you. So I think they're in the same boat as Cincinnati. They're going to be favored. They should win every game going forward from now on. Obviously, things happen, upsets happen, but they have a chance to go all the way. I agree with you. They win out. They should, get a shot at the playoff. So, if I'm an Oklahoma State fan, I'm cautiously optimistic that they're not going to blow it and that they're going to hold strong to what they've shown, through the first 8 weeks of the season, and that they're going to come through.
Yeah, I agree. I don't necessarily think that. I think they'll probably have a performance kind of like what we've seen from a lot of teams from the Big 12 when they get into the playoffs, where they're not necessarily competing with the teams in the SEC or the Big 10 or the Clemson. But I still think if they went out, they should get a shot.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Big 12 team, I think all you're hoping for is a shot at the playoff. I think it's expected at this point. You get in the playoff, you're losing 60 to 20.
Yeah, you shouldn't expect a national championship.
Yeah, put your backups in. Don't let your starters get injured.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a playoff game. If I'm a Big 12 senior, I'm opting out of that game.
Yeah, just get ready for the draft. Try to get 4th again next year.
Yeah,
it's the best you can hope for.
Oh yeah, I mean, talking about the draft, number 1 pick coming into the draft, pretty much a lock at this point. Trevor Lawrence throws a pick for the second straight weeks. First time that's happened in as long as I can remember. But Clemson still dominates. Any worry if you're Clemson? Any worry if you're Trevor Lawrence? Still no.
I still don't think so. I think this is probably one of the worst games Trevor Lawrence has had this season. His completion percentage is a little low. He threw an interception, but I mean, when you've got all the weapons that Clemson has, I don't see how you're really going to lose or even have a close game with anyone until you get to the playoffs. So I'd say no worries if you're Clemson. If you're Trevor Lawrence, not a perfect game. He's human, but still a solid performance from him. Did what he had to do. So really, I'd say all's good on the Clemson front,
Yeah, I mean, if Trevor Lawrence really starts giving you interceptions a game or, 1 pick a game against a certain defensive look, just give it to Travis Etienne. He had 3 touchdowns this week. He's been your guy all season on the ground, really for the past 4 years. So Keep rolling with them. You have, like you said, so many options on that Clemson team. If one of them's not working, you just move on to the next one. It's not a big deal if you're Dabo Swinney.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they've got probably the best all-around team, especially on offense this year. Uh, they definitely are the number one team right now. I mean, upsets happen, but typically not to Clemson. So I don't see a way that they don't get into the playoffs, really. I look for them to run the table again this year, get in there. And I mean, if I had to pick a national champion, I think it's hard to pick against Clemson right now, just based off of what we've seen.
Yeah, I agree with that. One team lots of people are picking over Clemson is Ohio State, and they have a big test coming up against a Penn State team that, like we said, just lost to Indiana this week or last week. This week they play Penn State. What are we hoping to see on both sides of that game this week?
Kind of like what we saw against Nebraska. You want that team to have consistency because good teams, especially better teams than Nebraska, they're going to make a run, sort of like Nebraska did in that first half, where they're going to challenge you. I think that if you're Justin Fields, you need to show composure. You need to show that you're a leader, just like he did this week. I think he only missed one pass. He had a rushing touchdown, threw for a couple touchdowns. So I think you're just looking for pretty much a continuation of what you saw this week. You want the defense to be solid. You don't want to have Justin Fields have too much pressure on him. But I think you just want consistency on both sides of the ball. You got to know that teams are going to make runs at you, but you just can't freak out, and you got to remember that you're a better team than them.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Penn State, if they want any shot at winning this game, they're going to need to show up on defense and make enough plays to force Justin Fields into mistakes. And I just don't think that without Micah Parsons, they can do that. So I'm betting my paycheck on Ohio State if you made me do it.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a lock at this point. I'm not expecting, maybe Penn State plays well, but I'm not expecting them to, come through really inspired after that loss last week. I think they probably know that they're not, on the same level as Ohio State. So I'm not expecting too much out of it. Maybe we'll get a good game, hopefully, really the first big game of this Big Ten season. But yeah, I mean, I just don't know, what kind of magic you need to summon if you're Penn State to get past Ohio State this week.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State has shown that they've got some issues. They just lost their running back too to a season-ending injury, I believe. So they've got a lot of problems, and going up against Ohio State is not a good place to try and fix your problems. You'd want to do that against a team where you can make mistakes and still come out on top. Ohio State's going to pounce on those mistakes that they made. And I mean, I don't think that it'll be that close of a game. I think Ohio State will, kind of like they did against Nebraska, just outlast Penn State and win by a touchdown or two.
Yeah, I mean, if assuming Ohio State pulls out the win this week, they should stay firmly in the top 5 in pretty much every ranking, maybe even go up a bit. So let's talk about our rankings this week. Did your top 5 change at all? Anything that you saw this
Nope.
week that'll change it? Yep.
Nope.
Yeah, no,
I'm staying the same as I was.
I agree with that. If anything, I just got more hope in Cincinnati. Big Cincy guy.
Mhm.
If you want some betting advice right now, I'm telling you, bet Cincy money line every week.
Yeah, I'm not gonna hop on the Cincinnati bandwagon just yet because I don't wanna steal your flow. But I'm gonna stick with the teams I got.
I respect that.
Hmm.
So let's see. I mean, top 5, at least in mine, I got, teams from all different conferences. Um, I think we've kind of locked in Clemson in the ACC, Ohio State in the Big Ten as our conference champions there. But let's talk about the SEC, maybe the American Pac-12. Who do we see coming out of those conferences?
I think out of the SEC, I think Alabama still wins without Jalen Waddle. I mean, they've got so many weapons at wide receiver already, and then they've got Najee Harris. Mac Jones is putting up like a crazy year in terms of his stats. So I think that they won't miss him too much. I think it's definitely nice to have more playmakers, but they've got enough where they can still come out of that conference on top. Big 12, I think we said Oklahoma State. They're prone to upsets right now, though, just like any team is. The margin against Iowa State's a little bit to be concerned about. I think that game was in Stillwater, so you like for them to win by a little bit more, especially because there's a lot of those teams, kind of like Iowa State, that are decent but not amazing. So, I think Oklahoma State out of there. I like Cincinnati. I mean, they look really good right now. That's who I've got really in the conferences.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to stick with you on Alabama and the SEC. I think there's so much depth on that team that Jalen Waddle's a great player, but you can kind of, compensate for that loss with Devontae Smith and all those other weapons they have. Also, I just don't think there's anyone in the SEC that's going to match where they are right now.
Hmm.
So lock in Alabama there. Oklahoma State, obviously in the Big 12. I like them too. You know my feelings on Cincinnati. I'm going to touch on the Pac-12 for a second.
Uh-oh.
I know we haven't even talked about them yet today.
I'm
Um,
not going to.
yeah, I mean we'll just move right on after this. But I'm going to take USC in the Pac-12. I think they have the best player in the conference in Keaton Slovis. I think we're kind of hoping for them to have a bounce back year. So I think they can pull out a conference title in this shortened season. Usually they have a pretty tough non-conference schedule, and they're not going to get that this year. So I think especially in a conference that's pretty weak at the bottom, they can pull it out, especially with the talent they have. But like I said, we're gonna move on. No more
Hmm.
Pac-12, at least for a few minutes. So we got some listener questions. Robert Kinney asks us, "Do we think Indiana has a chance at beating Ohio State? And will we be depressed if they lose to Rutgers?"
No and yes.
Okay.
Uh, to touch on the first one, I think Ohio State, the consistency that they showed against Nebraska, especially from Justin Fields, he looked a little bit more mature than he has before, which I think is a big step for Ohio State. No one ever questioned his talent. It was really just some decision making down the line. So I think you're really excited if you're Ohio State. And IU, I mean, like we touched on it, they're a good team. They've got good pieces, but they just can't match the talent that Ohio State has on both sides of the ball, really. I think that game could be close, maybe if IU shows up against like they did on Penn State, but Ohio State just doesn't look like they're going to make the mistakes that Penn State made against IU to let them back into this game. And will we be depressed if they lose to Rutgers? I mean, I'm a Purdue fan, so I don't like IU, but it's always nice to see other teams kind of break into the spotlight from the Big Ten. I'm a big Big Ten fan. So I'll be a little bit sad if they lose to Rutgers. I also just don't like Rutgers for some reason. I don't even think they should be in the Big Ten. I don't know why they're in the Big Ten. I don't know what they provide to being in the Big Ten. Uh, so yeah, I'd be pretty depressed if they lose to Rutgers, but I'm kind of cheering for IU the rest of the way, even though I don't really want to.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, to touch on them against Ohio State, I think if Indiana beats Ohio State, I don't want to be within 200 miles of Bloomington that night.
Yeah, I'm moving.
Um, yeah, it's dangerous. So I advise our listeners to stay away from Bloomington that night. Not only is it going to be a COVID hotspot, someone's going to die. So,
Yeah. Well, they're
uh,
reaching herd immunity, so
oh, that's true. They've been getting their cases up. I respect it.
yep.
Um, but yeah, I don't think they have a shot at Ohio State. I think it's going to take a miracle. I think Michael Penix is going to have to magically become Trevor Lawrence overnight. If that's going to happen, probably Trevor Lawrence plus if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and will I be depressed if they lose to Rutgers? I'm going to give it a big maybe. I think I'll have to. I'm gonna have to see what happens. I can't say I'm too attached to either team right now, but I always have some hope for Rutgers. I play NCAA 14 a lot. They have cool helmets on that game. Most of
Yep.
the on that game, usually we have like the old style uniforms. Rutgers has been pretty upgraded, so like when I get a job offer from Rutgers, I like it. Sometimes I take it. So I like Rutgers, so I'll let them slide if they pull off the upset. So not a big deal to me. I'm sure Bloomington will also be depressed if that happens. Maybe that's another reason you stay 100 miles away from Bloomington. Um,
Yeah,
I
I
think the
I
more
think both case scenarios you just don't want to be in Bloomington.
Yeah, I think the most interesting scenario here is Indiana beats Ohio State and loses to Rutgers. And in that case, I don't even know what to say.
It if that happens, I mean I don't think the Big Ten gets a playoff spot.
Yeah, if that happens, we're retiring.
Yeah, our six viewers are going to be really sad, but we're stepping away from the game if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I think I might just go put a betting parlay on that right now. That would probably pay me real well. But
Oh
we're
yeah.
going to move on from that. I've talked enough about Rutgers today. Um, I know I said no more Pac-12. Got one more. Seth Harrington asked us, what's more realistic, a Big 12 team or a Pac-12 team in the playoff, or a Group of Five team?
Um, right now I'm gonna go with a Big 12 team. I mean, choosing between the Big 12 and the Pac-12 is just kind of like choosing your least favorite kid. I hate both of them. Uh, really, I hate the Big 12 more, but I think if you look at the Big 12, they've got better teams, more in that middle section that can boost Oklahoma State's resume a little bit. Uh, I think Oklahoma State gets in over a Group of Five team as well. Even though some of those teams look really good, I just think that the way that the committee is going to vote, I think that Oklahoma State, given their resume, they're going to play a few teams that are ranked. I think that if a Big 12 team gets in, it has to be Oklahoma State. If not, it's going to be a Group of Five team first, and then a Pac-12 team. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Big 12, Oklahoma State probably has the best chance of any Big 12, Pac-12, or Group of Five team right now. They have the best resume. They just got that win against a good Iowa State team. So right now they'd be in the playoff if the season ended today. Pac-12, I don't see it happening. I said that I think USC is going to pull out of that conference earlier, but I don't think they're going to do it with a good enough record or good enough, showing to make the committee put them in the playoff, especially considering they're not ranked right now. So,
Mhm.
trash the Pac-12. Group of Five team, I'm gonna stick with the Cincy bandwagon. If it's gonna be anyone, it's gonna be Cincy. And like I said, I think Cincy can be undefeated. My worry is, let's say Cincy goes undefeated, Big 12, Oklahoma State has one loss. I think it's going to be really dependent on who that one loss is for Oklahoma State. So I think if it's to a good team, Oklahoma State gets in over an undefeated Cincinnati team. If it's to a bad team, then I think, we put Cincinnati in, considering they have wins over Army, SMU now, undefeated Cincy would get a win over UCF, Tulsa, teams like that. So I think, if Cincinnati has one loss, I think they're out of the picture. But right now, I'd rank Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, and then any team that comes out of the Pac-12 in terms of their likelihood to get into the playoff.
Yeah, I think the issue for Oklahoma State and what gives Cincinnati a little bit of hope is there's a lot of those Big 12 teams that are like fringe top 25 and still have a lot of talent. Like Oklahoma obviously has a lot of talent. I think they've lost 2 games already. Texas has a lot of talent. They've lost a couple games already. I mean, Baylor's pretty good. WVU is pretty good. All of those teams in there are decent, kind of like Iowa State. So I think if they lose a game, it's likely going to be to a team outside of the top 20. And so I think if you're a Cincinnati fan, you look at that rest of the schedule and you see teams that haven't necessarily performed to their full capabilities yet, and that may figure it out by the end of the season. And so I think that Cincinnati has a better chance, but I do agree that if Oklahoma State wins out, then they do get that spot over
Yeah, I
Cincinnati.
mean, and you talked about fringe top 25 teams. The thing is the rankings end at 25, and the committee doesn't always seem to recognize that a team that might just be on the outside, they don't
Yeah.
seem to give any weight to that. Like they treat any unranked team the same. So
Mhm.
I think if you lose to an unranked team, if you're, Oklahoma State right now, you're pretty done going forward. But that's enough college football. We're going to move on to the NFL. Um, let's talk about some bad play first. The NFC East and the Cowboys. We have a Sunday night game, Cowboys Eagles this week. Should anyone take the time to watch that? Should the NFL consider flexing it? We're going to start there because I think that's not a game most people want to see.
Flex it. I'm not watching the Cowboys. Not, I have Zeke on my fantasy team. The only reason I was watching it was to hopefully see him dominate. He had like 6 points this week. I
You're,
have no reason to watch it. You
you're not a
shouldn't have
Ben
a
DiNucci
reason to.
guy.
I am not. Not yet.
Not
Not yet.
he could show some stuff this week.
If he shows something, then then maybe I'll turn that game on. But I've got no reason to watch it. Everyone outside of Texas shouldn't watch it. If you're in Texas, maybe drink a little bit before you start watching it. And if everyone does that, I think maybe we can be happy.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to see Ben DiNucci. I watched some tape on him coming into the draft. I'm a big draft guy. So I
Hmm.
watched some tape on him back at James Madison. He's fun to watch. Seems like a nice guy. Maybe I want him to succeed. So we have Andy Dalton, obviously, in concussion protocol. It doesn't seem like the Cowboys are going to pick up another quarterback. So it's looking like Ben DiNucci, his first start is going to be on Sunday Night Football against the division leader, who happens to be 2-3-1, I think.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm not interested in that game. Maybe someone is. If you're in Texas, go vote or something. Don't watch
Yeah.
this game. Go
Just
vote.
save your mental health, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, you're in a your polls are tight. Go vote. Put our boy over the edge. Don't waste your time, especially if you're a Cowboys fan, because I don't think you're gonna like the outcome of this game. You're just gonna be sad watching it.
Yeah, and really, like, the Cowboys have a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They shouldn't be losing. They
Yeah,
really shouldn't be losing. Like, I
like the
don't see how you don't put this on the coaching staff.
like that O line is still good. Defense doesn't have much talent, but they
But
should
that
still
that
be better.
offense should be good enough.
I know. I think this is just, I don't even think it's on the coaching staff. I think it's going all the way back to management. I think this is a really poorly constructed football team, and it's starting to show
Mhm.
now. Like on defense, they let Byron Jones go. They don't have a pass rush. They have Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, and that's it on that side of the ball. They just traded Everson Griffin a few minutes before we started recording here. Um, so, and then, maybe you're not a Mike McCarthy fan. I'm not. But I put the fact that he's there, I put that
I'm
on
not.
management. I put that on Jerry Jones. I put it on Stephen Jones. So I'm
Yeah.
putting the blame on everyone past the active roster of football players. They need to be better. They haven't given this team a chance to win. Um, so I think those issues run deep. And I just don't think there's anything they can do at this point to save their season.
Yeah, it kind of seems to me like they've been falling apart like almost ever since the Tony Romo era.
Yeah.
And it's not like they haven't had good players. Like you said, it's just a management or coaching issue which can go back to management. It just kind of seems like they've been trying to like fill up holes with like duct tape. And
Yeah.
it's finally starting to burst at the seams for them.
Yeah. I think because earlier this year, they were in the hunt in a really bad division. Um, and they were in super high scoring games. Like we knew the defense was bad. We knew they couldn't stop anyone. I think these past few weeks have just started to show us how good Dak Prescott really is and how
Yeah.
important he is to this team. I was complaining right after he got hurt that Jerry should have given him his money, that we should be mad at Jerry because Jerry didn't give him the money that he wanted. I think that's especially true now. I wouldn't be surprised if Dak asked for even more money coming off injury this year. Um, so yeah, I think there's not much hope in Dallas. If you're a basketball fan and you're in Dallas, the Mavericks have some good stuff going. Mark Cuban, he's making some good moves on that team. But I think he's probably far and away the best Dallas area sports owner right now.
Yeah, just give up. Go to hockey. I think what's their hockey team? The Dallas Stars.
Yeah,
Do
yeah,
something. Just do something.
I know. Just find something more valuable to do with your time. Get a job or something. But
Yeah.
Cowboys obviously underwhelming this year. Let's talk about a team that has exceeded expectations. And that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Um, both teams coming into this game undefeated, the Steelers and the Titans. Steelers came out on top. Now the last undefeated team in the league. Um, we talked about the Steelers last week, how confident we were in them that they can make a run. Did this just reinforce, your belief in them going forward?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty impressive game for them. They really dominated that first half. That first half, they looked far and away the best team in the NFL. The second half, the Titans kind of came back a little bit. Uh, I think a big thing that I noticed was that, we clearly didn't watch. We went to Nashville. We had to clear our headspace for some more episodes.
Yep, yep.
Looking at the box score, Ben Roethlisberger had 3 interceptions. Uh, So, I mean, the Titans had a lot of opportunities. Steelers only gave up 24 points. And if you can make those mistakes, which you assume that a veteran like Big Ben is going to correct in the coming days, and still come out with a win against an undefeated team and a very definite playoff team in the Titans, I think you should be pretty happy if you're a Steelers fan and pretty confident going forward.
Yeah, I think we're not talking about the Steelers enough as probably the most talented team in the league right now.
Yeah.
Just, roster wise, because you have Big Ben at quarterback, you have probably a top five receiving core with Juju, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. Throw Eric Ebron in there if you want to. You
Hmm.
have a solid running back committee with James Conner, Benny Snell, Jalen Samuels. Defense has Cameron Hayward, TJ Watt, Minka Fitzpatrick. So much talent on both sides of the ball here. Um, so I'm looking back. I don't know why I didn't have high hopes for them coming in.
Yeah.
I think last season definitely left a sour taste in my mouth, lots of people's mouths, because I don't think we realized how bad Mason Rudolph was. Throwing Duck Hodges in there too.
Hey,
Um,
King.
yeah, the boy. Can't wait to see him back starting.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
the Cowboys should give him a chance. But
They really should.
yeah, but yeah, I'm really if I'm a Steelers fan, I'm starting to get my Super Bowl trip ready. Um, I think they can compete with Kansas City and Baltimore at the top of the AFC. I think they're probably better than what Baltimore has shown us this year. So I'm super happy with the Steelers. I'm impressed with them. I think that undefeated record, I don't think that's a fluke. I think that they earned that. I think that they can continue to build on that. And that it's going to be a great season for them going forward, barring another big injury like we saw last year.
Yeah, I agree. Like we said, the Steelers are now the last undefeated team in the
Yeah.
NFL because the Seahawks fall to the Cardinals. It was a really great game. Kyler Murray played pretty well. What did you think about that one?
I thought it was probably the game of the year so far. Um, I was talking to someone, I was FaceTiming someone during it, and she kept asking me, like, what are you looking at? Is there a ghost in your room? And I'm like, no, it's just Kyler Murray. It's just Russell Wilson throwing deep balls. It's DK Metcalf. Um, yeah, so that was a really fun game to watch. Isaiah Simmons was on the field for like 6 snaps and ended up with the play of the game there at the end.
Yeah.
Super happy for him. I think he's got a really bright future. But man, that I think this just needs to be a reflection on the NFC West just as a division, because we saw we'll get to it later. We saw the Rams blow out the Bears on Monday Night Football. The 49ers blew out the Patriots. After their Super Bowl trip last year, the Rams went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Um, I think this is the best division in football. I think three teams in this division probably make it to the playoffs. So if I just enjoy watching the NFC West right now. I think it's the opposite of the Big 12 and the Pac 12. As like,
Yeah.
this is like, I don't care who's playing, I'm going to tune in every week. Um, I don't think it's like anything bad on the Seahawks that they lost this game. Because Arizona is a good team. Kyler Murray is a good quarterback. They made lots of plays on defense. If you're going to be worried about anything, if you're Seattle, it's going to be 3 picks by Russell Wilson. But it's just a great game. Football is football. You gotta take the losses like that sometime.
Yeah. The NFC West, I think right now 3 teams have 5 wins, and then the 49ers have 4. So, I mean, that's kind of crazy looking at it.
Yeah, and the 49ers 4-3 right now at the bottom of the division. And 2 of those wins came when they were absolutely decimated by injuries. So yeah, that's going to be fun to watch going forward. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll keep it in the NFC West right now. Let's talk about the 49ers. They blew out the Patriots this weekend. Cam Newton got benched in the fourth quarter for Jarrett Stidham. Is there anything that's going to happen to turn around the Patriots? Do you think this is still Cam Newton's job to lose? What do we think is going on in New England right now?
I think it's still Cam Newton's job, and this was really kind of unexpected, I guess, because the offense just looked completely discombobulated in a sort, the way that we haven't seen from, a Josh McDaniels led offense under Bill Belichick led team. I think it's definitely still Cam's job. I think I don't know if there's issues a little bit with buying into the system or whether he's trying to do too much or something like that. You know, they've typically had quarterbacks that are more game managers, get the ball to their playmakers, something that Tom Brady was so good at. And Cam Newton's a completely different guy. You know, he's a lot more mobile. He can do it. He has big arm strength. He's got a lot of those intangibles. But I think that he's also a big personality and one that doesn't necessarily fit into this team, which may be why they were so ready to bench him uh, in that game. But I think that if he's able to buy in, and I have no doubt in my mind that the schematic issues in that offense are going to get figured out. I think they've got two of the brightest minds in the NFL right now. So I think that the Patriots will turn it around, at least on the offensive end, and that this may be a testament to that 49ers defense for playing so well without a lot of their players.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see teams kind of catch up with the Patriots. These last few weeks have looked really rough for them. And, if we're going to break out some advanced analytics here, I think this week Cam Newton threw 2 passes to his right. And that was the same area of the field he struggled with 2 years ago when he got hurt, when he hurt his foot.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw Carolina really struggle when that side of the field was essentially wiped out in the passing game. So if Cam Newton's not going to be able to throw to half the field, I don't think you can keep him in the game. I agree that it's still his job, but I think you have to find a way to open up that side of the field. You have to find a way to, get Cam Newton to make plays all around the field, not just in the running game, in the option game, or to his left. And if you can't figure that out, then either the Patriots are going to keep losing or it's Jarrett Stidham time. So I think their problem is also probably run on defense too. They gave up 33 points to San Fran this week. Stephon Gilmore is probably the only bright spot on that defense right now. So, all these things that they have built their dynasty on over the past 20 years, they're just not showing up this year. So I don't know if it's a schematic issue. I don't know if it's a Cam Newton issue. I don't know if it's a talent issue, but I think they do need to figure it out. I think they can figure it out because if anyone can do it, it's Bill Belichick. So it's going to be really interesting. I just don't see a path right now where they get into the playoffs. I think even at their best that they've shown this year, they're not one of the best 7 teams in the AFC. They're not going to win their division. So I think it's a really hard path to get to the playoffs for them. But I think Belichick's going to do what he can to turn this around in New England.
Yeah, I agree with that. Moving on to some of the players that used to be with the Patriots. Tom Brady and the Bucks beat the Raiders, who had shown a lot of promise, and they also signed Antonio Brown, who's finally back after his shenanigans throughout the last about year. I guess, what do you think about that game, and what do you think about that signing for the Bucks going forward?
I think the Bucks, if we're including this week, have been playing as good as anyone in the NFL over the past 3 or 4 weeks. They're starting to use more of the Tom Brady plays that we saw in New England. Like earlier this year, it was the Byron Leftwich system that we saw with Jameis Winston last year. It was heavy on those types of plays, those downfield plays that Tampa Bay liked to use last year. And Tom Brady's a better quarterback than Jameis Winston, but you can't use those types of plays with him. He's more of an underneath guy, slot target guy. So they've been using that a lot heavier these past few weeks. Chris Godwin played a lot of snaps out of the slot this week, had a huge game, had, I think, 9 catches this week, lots of targets from Tom Brady this week. So I think they have it figured out in Tampa Bay. I was a little worried earlier in the season. It just didn't look like Tom Brady was fitting in well with the offense. Now I think they've kind of reached that middle ground between what Tampa Bay wants to do, what the coaching staff wants to do, and what Tom wants to do. So I think I think Tampa Bay is probably going to make a deep run in the playoffs this year, especially if Antonio Brown can, stay on the team. None of his contract's guaranteed. I think that shows how much faith Tampa Bay has in him to stay out of issues. Um, but if he stays out of issues, if he plays, anything like he did during his stretch in Pittsburgh, then that's a third elite weapon that you have on offense. And that's not even including Gronkowski in the tight end. If you want to consider him a weapon for Tom Brady. So, I don't have much faith in Antonio Brown. That's the issue I have. I don't have much faith
Yeah.
in him. I'm not happy to see AB back in the league. I don't like him at all. I think he's bad for the league. But the good person in me wants to hope that he stays out of trouble, that he's successful here, and that the Bucs can make good use of him on this team.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bucks are really looking like they're kind of coming together. They've got two really good football minds in Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, and they're kind of just combining them. It's going to take a while to figure that out, but it looks like they're finally getting there. If AB can stay out of trouble, which I'm kind of hoping he does. I'm an AB fan. I think he's a really good receiver, one of the best receivers of the generation. So if he stays out of trouble, it's just another weapon. Moving on, we've been saying that the Bears suck for a few weeks now, pretty much ever since the show started. And we were finally right. They got blown out by the Rams. I was pretty happy to see it, if I'm being honest. What did you think about that?
First of all, shout out to LTI Player of the Week, Johnny Hecker. First player in the past 30 years.
For the
5
brand.
Punts. Yep, 5 punts all down within the opponent's 10. He had one on the 10, one on the 1, the 5, the 6, and the 7, I think, if I'm being correct. So, you got a weapon like that, always flipping field position. You're going to win games more likely than not. But moving on from the punter, I think it was a good performance by the Rams. Running game looked strong with Malcolm Brown and Darrell Henderson. Jared Goff was sharp at quarterback. Defense looked good. They held the Bears to 10 points. Nick Foles couldn't really get anything going. Not that Nick Foles has really had anything going this year, but little fun fact for you: Aaron Donald has never sacked Nick Foles, and if I'm correct, that didn't change last night. So, maybe that's a bright spot if you're a Bears fan, if you're Nick Foles, but outside of that, I think this was probably, if you're a Bears fan, your wake up call that you're not as good as your record showing so far.
Yeah. Staying in the NFL, but moving on kind of towards the draft, we've got a listener question. Thad Keckle asks, thoughts on Trevor Lawrence to the Jets?
Yes. So right before we started recording earlier today, Trevor Lawrence said, my mindset has been that I'm going to move on. That's probably referencing an interview he had earlier this year where he said that he expects this to be his last year at Clemson. Then he added, but who knows, there's a lot of things that could happen. So if you're a Jets fan, that makes you anything but confident that you're getting Trevor Lawrence. You're probably ended up with the number 1 pick. Just probability gives you that. But if I'm Trevor Lawrence, I don't want to be on the Jets. I also don't want to stay another year at Clemson. I don't want to risk being hurt. I told someone today, I think most likely thing, we see an Eli Manning situation. I think Trevor Lawrence has that sort of leverage. Probably the best quarterback prospect we've had in the past, 20 years. Maybe I think most people have him better than Andrew Luck right now. Mm-hmm. So I think we get into draft season, anything past February, once the Super Bowl ends, it's going to be all about what does Trevor Lawrence do? Does he declare? Does he force a trade away from the Jets, assuming the Jets end up with the number 1 pick? I hope he doesn't end up with the Jets because I'm a Trevor Lawrence fan. I want him to be somewhere where he can succeed, which I think is anywhere but the Jets. So my hope is that he comes out this year because I want to see him in the NFL and that he forces himself, does whatever he has to do to get away from the Jets franchise.
Yeah, I agree completely with what you said. I don't think the Jets are a place where almost anyone could succeed right now, especially with like the coaching and a lot of the front office stuff, that decisions that are being made there. I mean, like Sam Darnold's a really good NFL quarterback. He makes some mistakes, but he's a really talented quarterback, and people knew that coming out of college, and he just, I mean, whenever he makes a good play, it just gets ruined. That's the reason why a lot of the big media isn't talking about him too much. So, like you said, I really hope Trevor Lawrence doesn't go to the Jets as a Trevor Lawrence fan.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of makes me sad to talk about him being on the Jets. So we're going to move away from real football. We're going to move to fantasy. Last week, I put Justin Fields as a start, or Justin Herbert as a stardom. Put up 38 this week. I'm
Oh
going to
yeah.
start off. I'm going to say that he's locked in as a weekly starter in the stardom category. So it's probably the last you'll hear his name there. Um, if you have him, uh, lock him in as your starter. He's had his bye week already. Feel free to drop your other quarterbacks if you don't need them. I like Justin Herbert going forward as your quarterback. If you want to stick with quarterbacks, I like Teddy Bridgewater this week. That's a plus matchup against New Orleans. That's given up a lot of passing yards, a lot of points to quarterbacks. Bridgewater kind of had a rough game before his bye week against, or not his bye week, a couple weeks ago against Chicago, but bounced back. And like I mentioned last week, he had a couple really good weeks before that Chicago game. So I like Teddy Bridgewater against New Orleans.
Yeah, this one's kind of a no-brainer, but most Bucks against the Giants. The Giants have struggled this year on both sides of the ball. Tom Brady has a chance to put himself as the all-time PPR scoring leader if he scores 30.7 points this week. And Ronald Jones is another player who's looking to have a big week against the Giants defense. Look for the Bucks to get into the end zone a lot, especially with what we said, how that offense is starting to click now.
Yeah, I mean, Brady's put up 30 last week. So all he needs to do is match his performance last week. Um, and he'll become the all-time leading PPR scorer. So it's a better matchup for him this week against the Giants. I totally agree with that. Um, we're going to keep it Bills running, or move on to another running back, not Ronald Jones. If you're still looking for a guy, I know Raheem Mostert's out, Tevin Coleman's still out. Lots of running backs who you probably need, uh, you know, space to fill in your lineup. So I'm going to say start the Bills running backs this week, Devin Singletary and Zach Moss versus New England. New England defense gave up 30 plus to Jeff Wilson last week in San Fran. So and that wasn't a one-time thing. That's been going on all season with this New England defense. So I like the Bills running backs. Zach Moss got a big workload last week. Singletary's still getting a lot of snaps. So I think both of them could probably put up flex, maybe low RB2 numbers for you this week. But that's a matchup I like for them.
Yeah. Let's see here. Moving forward, it's another good matchup. You got Jonnu Smith with the Titans against the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals defense hasn't found much footing really at all. They're able to keep Baker Mayfield and the Browns down for a little bit, but I think the Browns still ended up putting up around 37 points. So the Bengals defense looks like they're having a pretty hard time this year. So Jonnu Smith is another good start at tight end, especially in a league where the tight ends are somewhat random and a lot of them are hard to find on the waivers.
Yeah. So now we're going to move on, guys who should sit this week. Lots of people have been hyping up Tua Tagovailoa. He has a tough matchup this week against the Rams. This Dolphins offense has been good to Ryan Fitzpatrick the past few weeks before he got benched before their bye week. But making his first start, I don't like Tua against a solid Rams defense, especially one that's coming off a really good performance against Chicago last week. So I'm staying away from Tua. Pick him up if you want to. If you need quarterback help, pick him up. See if he can do something down the stretch, especially if you're in a dynasty league or a 2 QB league. Pick him up, but don't start him this week. Don't expect him to put up anything significant for you this week.
Another person to sit, Mike Davis against the Falcons. McCaffrey's supposed to return, but even if he sits out, Davis has struggled recently. in that offense. He scored 11.5 points against Chicago and 8.6 against New Orleans. So regardless of whether McCaffrey comes back, Mike Davis is a good person to sit if you can find a replacement for him.
Yeah, and then talk about replacements. Lots of people have been needing replaced on this Cowboys offense. We've been saying don't trust the receivers. Now they don't have a quarterback to trust. So I would just say don't trust any Cowboys player outside of Ezekiel Elliott. You mentioned Zeke had a rough week last week, but volume's really going to help him this week. So I think Elliott's still a reliable starter, even if he only puts up RB2 numbers. But I would not trust any other Cowboys player this week. And if we want to keep it with a running back, I'm staying away from Justin Jackson against Denver. Denver's defense third versus running backs in terms of PPR scoring this week. And he only had 10.5 points against a really weak Jacksonville defense last week. So I'm staying away from Justin Jackson. And those are my running backs that I'm sitting this week. Sticking with receivers, we talked about receivers we don't like, and those are usually guys who, are in deep receiving cores. So I'm going to say probably for the third week in a row, stay away from the Steelers receivers. We got 2 big weeks from Chase Claypool and then essentially nothing last week. So it's too inconsistent unless you need, that high ceiling, that high scoring potential. Stay away from them. They're not going to be reliable enough for you to count on in your lineup this week.
Moving on to some sleepers. Who do you have in that category?
Yeah, so talked about Ben DiNucci. We don't know much about him, but maybe if you want to pick him up in a 2 QB league, if you're in a bad spot. I just wanted to say Ben DiNucci's name again. I like him, but he's against the Eagles this week, so I don't know how many of you are going to be in deep 2 QB leagues and in a bad spot, but if you've been worrying about picking up Ben DiNucci in that scenario, this is the green light to go for it. Another sleeper I have, Damian Harris against Buffalo. We're probably going to see a run-heavy attack from New England this week. We talked earlier about how the passing game's not really working for them. This is a Buffalo defense that gave up 204 yards, 33 PPR points to Kansas City running backs week 6. It's a really uncharacteristic performance against Kansas City to see them go really run heavy, but the Buffalo defense allowed it. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had a great game that week. So I like Damian Harris as the New England running back who's going to be the beneficiary of that. And then my last sleeper this week is Brandon Ayuk against Seattle. He had 17 PPR points against New England, and that his target share is probably only going to increase. Deebo Samuel's still out for the Niners. This Niners offense has kind of picked it up. They put up 33 last week. And like we said, he's coming off a big game against New England. This is a Seattle defense that has given up lots of points to wide receivers. Brandon Ayuk is a guy I like as a flex, maybe a low wide receiver 3 or wide receiver 2. But no matter what, I'm picking him up. I'm seeing what he does this week.
All right, moving on to some pickups that you may be able to get off the waiver wire or trade for. Who do you have in this category?
My number one guy is going to be Nelson Agholor. He's 3% roster, so that means he's available in 97% of leagues. And I don't see how he's gotten to that point. He had 14.4 points 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, 14.7 3 weeks ago, had a bye week, and then came back for 21.7 points. So he's had a great stretch of games. He has 4 touchdowns on the season. It seems like he's here to stay in John Gruden's offense. Henry Ruggs is not getting the targets that we expected him to coming into the season, and they're mainly going to Nelson Agholor. So I like Agholor as a guy you can pick up, use him as a spot starter, maybe a matchup guy, but I like him. Next man up, JaMycal Hasty. San Fran's still having massive issues regarding injuries in their backfield. Raheem Mostert's still out. Tevin Coleman's still out. Now Jeff Wilson's out. And JaMycal Hasty is going to be the only man behind Jerick McKinnon. Usually we see both on a week-to-week basis that this San Fran offense can support 2 viable fantasy running backs. So I'm going with JaMycal Hasty. I like him if you need a running back. Next guy, just an interesting guy to watch, Dez Bryant, called up to or signed to Baltimore's practice squad. This is a Baltimore offense that needs some help at the receiver position. So I don't know exactly what this Dez Bryant signing signifies for Baltimore, But if this is one of those things where they want to see how he does on the practice squad, they want to see if he's up to speed, if he's physically okay to go, and then bring him up to the active roster, then I think he can be really valuable for your fantasy team. So if you have a bench spot that you're willing to sacrifice, if you're in a deep league, I'm looking at Des Bryant. And then another receiver that I'd pick up, Rashard Higgins, probably available in your league. Odell Beckham Jr. out with a torn ACL. Higgins is probably going to step up, fill that role, get most of OBJ's targets. So I like him going forward. And then a guy who's probably rostered in your league, but another receiver to buy low on right now because he hasn't produced recently is Michael Gallup. We have the trade deadline coming next week. And we've already seen one Cowboys trade with them sending Everson Griffin to the Lions. We might see another with Michael Gallup going somewhere because he's kind of fallen out of favor with this Dallas offense. So probably the same situation as Des Bryant. If you have a place to put him on your bench, if you have a deep league, maybe sacrifice some assets, get him for probably the lowest price you'll be able to get him this season, and hope that he gets sent to a team where he is a number one or a number two option going forward.
All right. That's enough with the fantasy. Hopefully we gave you enough to win your games this week. Now moving on to one of our favorite segments, at least, the hot or not take segment. The first one, not necessarily a take as much as something dumb that we wanted to put somewhere. Todd Gurley fell into the end zone and the Falcons blow a late lead because the Lions were able to get the ball back and march down the field and score. I mean, there's not really much to talk about here. What do you think about it?
I think probably the most interesting part of this is the picture that came out later of, like the Lions defenders signaling for the touchdown.
Yeah.
Todd Gurley trying to say it wasn't a touchdown. I think that's probably one of the most interesting pictures we'll get this season. I mean, tough for the Falcons. I think this was like the third time this season they've lost when they're given a 99% plus chance to win the game at some point in the game. I think it was last week we talked about if Atlanta is cursed as a sports city. If it is, this is just like the latest definition of it, that your guy can't even stop himself from scoring. So, that's a tough scene for Atlanta. Hate to see it, but pretty entertaining for everyone who's not a Falcons fan.
Yeah, I mean, I might change my mind. Atlanta may be cursed. This is just like ridiculous at this point.
Yeah. We're going to move on. Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt. This happened last week, but details came out after we recorded last week. Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt fired his defensive line coach, Jimmy Brumbaugh, during the loss to Kentucky. Is this a hot take, or is this hot or not? What do we think about this?
That's hot. I'm a big fan. I feel like a lot of times, at least this has happened to teams that I'm a fan on. Teams I'm a fan of, they'll hang on to coaches just because they think they'll improve, or I don't know if there's some politics behind it or what. But I mean, if he's messing up and you feel like there's enough reason to it, get rid of him. Big fan.
Oh yeah. I must say maybe it's a little less hot than you're saying. It reminds me a lot of when Vontae Davis retired at halftime. What was that, like 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I think losing a job at halftime on your own terms is hot. On someone else's terms, not. So if you're Jimmy Brumbaugh, if you're the coach who got fired, you should be super embarrassed that you couldn't even make it through a game.
Yeah.
But I guess on Jeremy Pruitt's part, I like it. Don't give him more time. I don't know how they pay their coaches. Maybe it's a game thing. Maybe you only give him half a game check now. You save some money. So I respect the move.
Yeah, I agree. Keeping it in the SEC, Lane Kiffin was fined $25,000 for retweeting that SEC officiating is a disgrace. Now, this came after the SEC admitted that officials should have reviewed a kickoff where an Auburn player made contact with the ball, but the play was not ruled a fumble. Is this hot or not by Lane Kiffin?
I think it has to be hot only because he hasn't given up on it. Like ever since, he's been saying that he's going to pay his fine in 2.5 million pennies. So I respect that. I think we talked week one, our first episode, we did this about him stealing signs from Bama.
Mm-hmm.
I think Lane Kiffin has just earned the right to do whatever he wants. Maybe he's not a good coach, but he's a lot of fun to listen to. So I think it's hot. I always hate it when like conferences or leagues fine people for criticizing officials. Like, everyone knows it's bad. The fans are saying it's bad. You can watch it be bad. In most cases, like the SEC did here, they literally come out and say that they were wrong. I think it's probably, I think you should be able to criticize them. So not hot on the SEC, hot on Lane Kiffin. I like him speaking his mind.
Oh yeah, we're big Lane Kiffin fans on this show. Even if I still think that he stole signs from Alabama in the first week of this podcast. But moving on back to the NFL, Tua was announced that he will be starting for the Dolphins this week against the Rams, and this is after Ryan Fitzpatrick, aka Fitzmagic, has led the Dolphins off to a pretty hot start. Fitzpatrick gave a pretty emotional press conference, talking about losing his starting job. I guess we'll go, is this hot or not by the Dolphins?
I'm gonna say not, just because they're 3-3 right now. They have a chance to make the playoffs. We touched on it last week, but we were waiting for this week to get into more depth about it. Fitzmagic had been playing really well. That's probably not a 3-3 roster, especially given who they've played so far. So you got to give Fitzmagic some credit there. I'm happy to see Tua get a shot. I'm super excited to watch him this week. He was one of my favorite players when he was back at Bama, but you just got to feel bad for Fitzmagic. I think like now everyone who's not a Dolphins fan probably has this like really sad association with them because they just watched like Fitzmagic, who's like one of the most loved guys in the league, get like heartbroken by them.
Yeah.
So yeah, not hot on the Dolphins, but I think if you need a silver lining, the Dolphins probably have like the most likable quarterback room in the league.
Oh
with
yeah.
Tua and Fitzpatrick. You can't dislike either of those guys. But yeah, not a huge fan of that for Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's kind of interesting to start Tua coming off of a bye against the Rams and Aaron Donald. It feels like that's kind of an interesting place for him to dip his toe into the league. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, I'm going to go with not, just like you on this one.
Yeah. All right, last thing we got today. We got a quote. I was really about to give the peace sign to them, but this finger was kind of hurting, so it didn't make it up in time. That was DeAndre Hopkins on giving the middle finger to Trump supporters on his way to the game in which he put up 10 catches for 103 yards and a touchdown in a win on Sunday Night Football against previously undefeated Seattle.
Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't really need to even explain that. That's a pretty hot take. I'm a big fan of that. I like the confidence. I like that athletes are speaking out and can have a voice, even though a lot of people say, shut up and play. And sometimes, you don't want politics getting too much into sports. But if he feels like he needs to, I'm going to go with DeAndre Hopkins on this, and then he proved it on the field. So, big fan.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to swing people's votes, like what better than having the guy whose jersey you probably own flip you off on the interstate? Like,
yeah,
I respect it. Frankly, I'd respect that move if it came from, the backup quarterback of the B team at Clay Middle School when his dad was driving him to the game. I respect it in any context. He could have gone for one catch for 2 yards and a fumble, and I would have respected the move. So, big props to DeAndre Hopkins there. I think more people should do it.
Oh, yeah.
We're all about disrespecting people with differing views here at Last Two In.
Yeah. We actually hate most people.
Yeah, we do.
We will judge you for your beliefs.
To those of you listening, we probably like you. If you have people who disagree with us, yeah, I mean, you probably know our audience better. But we'll need to do some audience analytics, see who we need to ban from listening from now on.
Shout out to everyone in Singapore watching.
Oh, yeah, big fans. We'll get some international sports coming for you guys soon. Wasn't on the itinerary this week, but it's something we want to make sure you guys have something to hear this week or next week.
Oh, yeah.
Forward. Yep. But I think that's all we have for today. Again, follow us on social media at Last2In on Instagram and Twitter. Check us out. Follow us on SoundCloud, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts. Listen to us.
We're everywhere.
Yep. We have blanketed the media industry. There is no stopping us. Get on the wave now. Tell your friends to get on the wave. Get your parents on the wave. There is no stopping the Last Two In bandwagon. So always appreciate you guys tuning in. Can't wait to see you guys next week.
Yep.